My name's Andrea. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And my sobriety date is October 12th, 1986. I just celebrated 36 years of sobriety. I did not get sober when I was 10. I know I look awesome. I'm approaching 60. It's all like smoke and mirrors. A little Botox right here. But it's really worn off right now, so I'm working out a lot. Anyway, what do I want to say? I know, it's a freak show.
No, you're amazing. Go ahead, please.
So the two things my dad remembers most, I was 21 years old when I got here. And the two things my dad remembers most is that I was 20, but I looked like I was 40. And I could carry on a conversation for no more than about 60 seconds. Can y'all hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me know if I'm quiet. I can be quiet. So, yeah, I reversed aged once I got here, right? Because that's what this does to us. I found some, if you want to, I found a picture of me at age 19 recently. And then I found a picture of me at 30 days sober. Had the date on it. It was like 30 days sober. And the transformation is stunning. And I've just kind of reversed age since then. But I've had some experience here. Seeing you girls get up is a huge deal for me. Because this is really weird. Today's January 27th. When I was 14 years old, I started drinking. First time I had sex, I got pregnant. My family hid me. They sent me to Phoenix, Arizona. They wouldn't tell anybody. I waited as long as I could so I wouldn't have to have an abortion. They hid that till I was in treatment. And I had this beautiful baby girl on January 27th, 1980. She's 42 years old today. I have a 42-year-old. I was loaded. That was my introduction to drinking. So I've really never brought that up at the podium, but that hurt. My family hid me, and they took the baby out of my arms, and I don't know where she is. Hopefully she'll find me on some DNA site one day, though. I got to tell that to my kids who have never seen me loaded. When they were in high school, I sat them down and said, hey. I just felt like I had to tell them. So anyway, today's that day. I'll tell you how it started for me. I was raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, kind of in a Camelot situation. Really privileged parents. Grandpa bought them cars and houses, and everything looked really good on the outside. And it was fun for a while. I remember my parents used to have these really swanky bridge parties, and they would have all their friends to our house, and we'd go to different houses. And I remember they'd make daiquiris, and I would sit on the counter and watch Dad make them, and I'd put my finger in them. I don't know if this was my first drink, but maybe it was, because I would go around and I would steal everybody's drinks. I remember people were like, get away. And those were my funnest nights of my childhood. And maybe I was loaded. Maybe I got that ease and comfort, those nights. And so that could have been my first drink, and I just knew everything was happening when there was alcohol involved. My dad was a sex addict, so I remember my mom just standing at the shears in the windows waiting for him to come home every night. And I remember the whispers, and I remember me crying myself to sleep every night. I never knew what was going on, but I knew there was something going on, and I knew it was really sad and really shitty. And so I loved my dad. He was everything. He had manicures and the coolest car and the best suits, and he looked like Sean Connery, and he was everything, and he was an asshole. And he's 85 years old today, and I love him. He did the best he could with what he had, and so did my mom. And so I've been able to make amends. I was a horrible daughter as well, and I've been able to make amends. But anyway, I go to school, kindergarten. I get super bullied on the first day. And I don't know what it was, why it was the pick on me thing, but I was kind of awkward. You know how we hear about alcoholics saying we were different, we were awkward. I think most kids are like that. It's not just us. I mean, we definitely have quirks, right? But recently I've realized it's like even normies feel weird when they're little. So anyway, I felt weird. I felt different. And everybody treated me that way as well. And so I was super anxious and awkward and just bullied from kindergarten through senior year in high school. My first conscious drink was when I was 14 years old. I was over at Judge Green's daughter's house, and we drank a bottle of 151, 3 14-year-old girls. And I remember waking up on the hot trampoline just like burning up and looking over the edge, and I'm barfing, and the little white dog is eating my puke. And I'm just like, I have found it. I've got to do this again. Immediately, I have to do this again. I felt like hell, but I knew I had found the ease and comfort, and that's what I got with my first drink, was the ease and comfort that I needed. And so my sad childhood and all the sad stuff that happened, if I was ever sad, my mom would say, "You're not sad, you're not crying." Or if I'd laugh too much, she'd say, "No laughing. No. You just have to shut up and be quiet, stay out of the way." So I doubted that I was real. I didn't know what to think. I got that first drink, and I had an ease and comfort, and it really helped me. And it saved me from suicide from ages 14 to 21. I had one attempt at suicide. It did not, I was obviously not successful, but alcohol saved my life for sure. And I had the baby, and Mom sent me away, and I was so shamed for it. My whole family, it was just like the talk of the town that nobody really knew, but people guessed, and the shame that my family had, and that I had for myself. I just felt like garbage. So the alcohol eased that. But no matter what happened in my childhood, if I had taken the first drink, I would have been an alcoholic. That doesn't have anything to do, that sad stuff doesn't have anything to do with why I drink or how I drink. I have a physiological difference in my brain, 100%. Like, my sister can have a glass of wine and she feels tipsy and puts it down. And when I have a glass of wine, I feel like I've been shooting heroin and I want to keep going. And I have no power over not taking the first drink. And once I do take that first drink, it's like I go into instant withdrawal. I have a drink and it's like I'm instantly withdrawing, and I have to have more. I have to have more. And in those 5 years or 7 years that I drank, I really didn't try to quit a lot. I only surrounded myself with people that drank. But I would try to make it to work in the morning, not loaded. So at midnight, it'd be like, okay, one more hour, and so I'll do a line of Coke, and then I'll drink, and I'll sleep at 2, and I'll get to work at 8 o'clock. But then it was 2 o'clock, and then it was 3 o'clock, that chase all night, and then pretty soon the birds are coming up, and it's the next day, and I'm going to work loaded. And so those are the times I tried to not drink, or having to show up to a family event or a performance of some sort, either not making it because I was so loaded, really wanted to be there, just couldn't pull it off. I couldn't pull it off. I was loaded somewhere. Didn't show up to my high school graduation, and I did barely graduate. Never got a diploma, but did not go to the ceremony. And then I guess I was about, Mom tried to fix me all the time. She did the best she could with what she had, right? She grew up in Washington, D.C. Her dad was a senator and a congressman in the White House with the Kennedys, and the great friends with Fords and Bushes and all that crap. And they had to shred their garbage. And so my mom didn't know what to do with me. So she would move me around. I was a nanny in D.C. I went to school in Switzerland, and she thought it would maybe help, but of course it didn't. I almost died being a nanny, and I drove those kids drunk every single day. Makes me sick every day, but I can't regret the pastor wished to shut the door on it, right? Because God's going to use that somewhere. It makes me sick to this day. Almost died in a lake, in a blackout in Switzerland one night. Anyway, so they did the best they could with what they had, and so that was my 20s. So I'm from Salt Lake City originally, but we moved to Park City when I graduated high school, and it's a little mountain town about 30 minutes up from Salt Lake. And I was the third grade teacher at Miss Billy's kids campus, and I was drinking every night and using every night. And I found a guy, and we were exactly the same. He was kind of more high functioning. He wouldn't lose jobs as much as I did, though. We were definitely soulmates. Holy shit, we were like soulmates. And so I walk into work one day, and Billy, who happened to be a friend of my mother's and the owner of the establishment there, says, "Andrea, your mom's in the hospital. We have to get down to the city right away. Something's wrong." And it was a Monday morning at 9 o'clock, right? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, she's finally had a breakdown or something. My mom, because she was really fake and everything and trying to hold it together all the time. So we drive down to the city, and we get in the elevator, and she said, 5th floor. And the 5th floor, it says 5, and it says Dayspring / psych unit. I'm like, well, she's on the psych unit. What's Dayspring, right? So the elevator opens, and it's not a psych unit. This is obviously the day spring half of the floor, and it's all carpeted, and there's a woman at the front desk with a big giant beehive. Her name was Charlene, and she was waiting for me. She said, "Are you Andrea?" And she had like an accent from Texas. It was crazy. And I said, "Yes, I am." And all of a sudden I was like, I knew Mom was doing something, right? And there's cops lined up down the hall. They're like, "We'd like you to come over here and go down this hall." And at the end of the hall, there was an open doorway. And I knew, and I was just started cussing down the hall, and they're ushering me down the hall, and my employer's with me. And I walk in, and everyone has flown in from all over the country, and they're sitting right here in this circle, and they have their little yellow legal pads. You know, they've done their homework. And so we're going to have an intervention. And so they went around, and they said, "Please, there's a chair for you." There was one chair for me. I sat down, furious. Just like, "Fuck you, mother." Excuse me. I was horrible, and I still try to watch it. I'm sorry if I offended, but anyway, so they all went around, and they each read off their little pad. "We were really worried when we saw you with half dressed on Main Street doing this and this and this." And then they go around, they tell the specific times of the crazy shit I would do. And then they went around and said, "We love you so much because of this and this," how much they love me and how much they care about me. And I'm sitting there fuming. I'm like, "Just get me out of here." And there were no cell phones then. And I, couldn't talk to my boyfriend who was up the canyon. And so the guy running it was one of us. His name was Byron. And he said, "Your family would really like it if you stayed here for 30 days. And I'm just like, "Are you kidding me? There's no way. Alcoholism? What is alcoholism? I'm not an alcoholic. I only surrounded myself with alcoholics." So I couldn't even grasp that I was an alcoholic. This was in October. This was October 13th. This was Monday. My sobriety date was October 12th. Sunday, because I had injured myself cognitively so horribly on Saturday night that I couldn't even get to the drink the next day. Like, have you ever been so hungover that like you feel like you're brain damaged like forever? It's like, I don't know. I couldn't. I was so injured from Saturday night. So my sobriety date is Sunday. So Byron gets up and he says they'd like you to stay here for 30 days. And I'm like, I stand up and I'm like, "I hate you, mother," screaming horrible things at her. "You suck. I'm leaving. Goodbye." And they're all just like, "Oh, don't leave." And Byron's like, "Hey, come into my office before you leave. I just want to talk to you just for a second." So I go in and he says, I sit down in his office and I'm just shaking my head. And he knows my story. He knows my family story. He knows the whole deal. That's what we do. This is how we roll. He said, "Hey, I just want you to know you never have to drink or use again as long as you live if you don't want to." And my disease heard that. It was like a dagger through the heart of my disease and my denial. And I was just stunned by those words that he said. Because I thought that's the only way I could live. If I didn't live like that, I was going to die or I was going to take myself out. So that was October. July, my boyfriend, who I lived with, Scott, he comes home, he gets a DUI, and he has to go down to the city, and he has to go to the drunk class. And there's a guy from AA there, and there's a couple other people there, and the cops and stuff, and they're giving him the spiel about alcoholism, how you've got to get over, we're going to release your or make your DUI not so bad if you take this class and do all these things, and go to AA. And here's a Jellinek chart, and I don't know if y'all have seen a Jellinek chart, but it's a bell-shaped curve that starts up here, and this is you're not drinking. Then you start drinking, your life kind of goes in the shitter, right? You miss jobs, you miss this, you blow off your kids, you go bankrupt, you lose everything. You're in the skid row bum, and down here you're almost dead. And the other side, it's got you kind of going back up and getting your life together. And so it's really scientific. It's all peer-reviewed, proven stuff. And my boyfriend was a scientist, 100% atheist scientist. He comes home in July waving this thing going, "We're alcoholics. We're right down here. And we just have to go to AA, and this is what's wrong with us." And I was just like, "You're kidding me." I couldn't relate at all. But he's like, "This is it. This is what's going on with us, just so you know. It's science. And we have this disease." And so I said, "Okay, whatever." So he stopped drinking for 2 weeks. And so that was my first little inclination of alcoholism, or the word Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought that was for nobody I knew. I didn't know much. This was 1986. It wasn't huge. It was the starting of the big treatment boom, right? Super hard to get sober in the 80s because a lot of the treatment centers were into like the John Bradshaw and all the psychobabble bullshit, not the 164. Anyway, I got into the treatment center and I said, this will be a 30-day vacation. They'll take care of me. It's going to be great. And so they put me in my jammies, put on my bracelet, and I said, I'll stay, but I'm staying for me. This is not for my family. This is absolutely for me. And they made me stay in the jammies for 3 days, and I stormed up and down the hall. I could not sleep. I needed something for sleep, and I just ranted and raved, and I was an ass, and Shirley would just say, you're going to be okay, and I love you. And I would be like, fuck you. That's who I was. I was vile. And so Tuesday night, there's an AA meeting on the unit, my first AA meeting. And I walk in my jammies and my bracelet, and I sit in the back. I'm like, okay, Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever. And I sit in the back, and this young man in his 20s, like me probably, gets up and he gets a 30-day chip. So when I saw you guys get up and get a 30-day chip, I don't get to see that a lot. I'm in a small town. I mean, I travel some, but when I see people come in, I have such a reverence for you because God has recently worked this miracle in your life. You know, it's really recent with you, and he works every day in our lives too, and everybody else's life. But to see you just finding these rooms is such a gift because the odds are against us. And we got here tonight, you know, we're here. We're fucking lucky. And so this kid gets up and he gets a 30-day chip, and he's beautiful. It's just like glowing. And I'm like, what? What is Alcoholics Anonymous? This is incredible. And they're reading the preamble and stuff, and I'm listening to the preamble and the steps, and I'm like, wow, are you kidding me, really? And how it works. I listened to every word of that, and I'm like, this is amazing. So that was Alcoholics Anonymous for me. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, they put us in the white van. I saw y'all pull up in the white van. I was chasing you. I'm like, I want to be in the white van again. Oh my God. Put me back in the womb. But I love treatment. It's so safe. Oh, but I found treatment out here too. It's just going to meetings and going to a lot of conferences and conventions. I can get that same feeling out there. I walk into an Alano club. They put us in the white van. We go to an Alano club, and I walk into this old church, and it's still there in Salt Lake City. It's a great big club, and there's like 300 people on a Thursday night. And I walk in, and there's a greeter at the door, and she was like, she knew where we were coming from, and she's like, I am so glad you're here. What's your name? And she was genuinely like, damn, I'm so happy you made it, you know? And the next week, she remembered my name, and she was still just as excited that I was there. And that night, I knew that this was my family. And I got the same ease and comfort that I get from the drink when I come into these rooms. When I'm asked to speak, I hate it. I'm scared. You know, it's not what I choose to do, but I get asked, and I've never turned down an AA request. So here I am. But this is my home, and you guys are my family. My biological family is my biological family. They come to me for spiritual advice now and all sorts of stuff, and it's very different. It's really different. It's the 12 steps, and they work for everyone, not just us. And so, anyway, so I end up at the Alano Club. I stay in treatment for 30 days, and it was the 80s. The treatment center I went to was in the first 164 pages. I really lucked out because it wasn't like that back then. It was group therapy and one-on-one constantly all day, and maybe you'd get a 12-step meeting at the end of the day. But I went in and I watched Father Martin Chalk talks all day long. Yeah. And they taught me about the disease concept and the doctor's opinion, right? And that I had a physiological difference, and that totally made sense to me. Reading the doctor's opinion is like, yes, that's me 100%. I'm powerless. And I lack power. That is my problem, right? I completely lack power. To the whole world, I lack power, and to my drinking and everything else. And so I have to tap into a power. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is in the first 64 pages. We have to tap into a power or forget it. We also have to have fun or forget it. You know, we have to be happy, joyous, and free. And it's here. Oh my gosh, it's here. Anyway, so I really lucked out. Got a wonderful sponsor. And back then, back then, there was somebody that was doing research on an alcoholic brain and a heroin addict brain. And what they were finding was that the alcoholic brain was producing this stuff called tetrahydroisoquinoline, THIQ. It was very similar to what the heroin addict brain was producing, right? And these were all just hypotheses. But they found out that this is somewhat true now. So when I drink, it's totally different than somebody else. And I go into the phenomenon of craving. And so it's a physiological thing. It is not a moral thing. It's not a willpower thing whatsoever. I have so much willpower. It's unbelievable. But not when it comes to alcohol. I have no choices and I'm powerless. I do everything my sponsor says, no matter what. And we're in the book. I did really amazing. They gave us a beautiful 4-step in treatment. Usually you don't get that. But it was awesome. So I got out of there and found this amazing sponsor from the same treatment center a couple years before. And I got to do my 5th step with her. And that was my first time through the steps. And I go through the steps about every 2 to 3 years. I go through all the steps with my sponsor. And then we go through all the traditions. And then we take a quick couple weeks on the concepts. And then I take a break and do other stuff, do other service. And then I start up again. I'm on step 3 right now. And one Saturday or one Friday night, my sponsor calls me. She said, get your big book, go down to this church tomorrow and plan on staying all day. And I'm just like, oh, whatever. Of course, I'll do whatever you say. So I go into this church. It's probably, 4 times bigger than this. And it's packed. Every chair is full. And I go in, of course, 5 minutes late. And there's no place to sit except right up at the table where these 2 old guys are sitting with their big books. So I sit right at their feet, and it's Joe and Charlie.
Wow.
So I get to study with Joe and Charlie for a weekend, and I'm maybe a year sober. And so I really lucked out. I'm 21 years old. I'm in the first 164. It's the 80s. And I did not go to aftercare. Because if you go to aftercare, you commit suicide because they just tell you what a piece of shit you are. And it's not in the book. Nothing about the book was in aftercare, and I just intuitively knew that it was okay for me not to go there. I just kind of kept sticking with the winners that were in this, and that's why I'm here today. Then another time she says, we've got a really big speaker coming, and I want you to go to dinner with he and his wife tonight. And I'm like, okay, whatever, how awkward is this going to be? So I go, and it's Clancy on my left and his wife Charlotte on my right. And I'm still a year sober, and I get to meet all these really great old timers in AA. And so that was such a gift. My husband and I, my boyfriend, don't get married. Don't do anything drastic in your first year. We live together, right? And the day I graduated from treatment, the family's going, don't go back to living with him, right? And I'm like, no, out of my life. I had learned in Family Week what my family was made of, and I was still pissed at them. So anyway, I moved back in with Scott, and the only way he could see me is if he came to the AA meetings on the unit, right? Or he went to the Alana Club, so we'd sit together, and he was just all in. But he's an atheist. But there's a place for atheists as well. And so we were all in AA, 100%. And we got sober in this little town, Park City, Utah. There were 3 meetings a week, and it was in the waiting area of Miners Automotive, and it was 5 metal chairs on the concrete waiting area in this garage. And we had a yellow pad. We would sign our names. And then afterwards, they'd say, we're going to coffee at the cafe. And I'm shy and awkward around people. I just am. And I did not want to do that. It's still hard for me. I'm such a loner. I go to movies alone. I go to conferences alone. I do everything alone. But so I went and I learned to laugh, like the real deal laughing, like till you are crying. And that's what I learned in here too. I grew up. You hear people talk about this. I grew up in here. I learned how to be a human in here because I was not a human. I was just I was so inauthentic, and everything in here was authentic, and I was shocked at the honesty. And anyway, I was just so grateful. We wait a year, right? We have to wait a year before we can get married, and we're soulmates. And we do all the service work, and we're just so into it. We would go and speak at schools. I remember if your father and your mother are both alcoholics, 80% chance your kids are going to have the bug, especially if it's a male, right? So we would talk about the disease concept, and I remember one kid saying, okay, so if this is the fact and it's super hereditary, how can you guys justify getting married and ever having children? And I'm just like, I'll have to get back to you on that. That was upsetting. But so anyway, we get married at 1 year, and we got married here. I'll hit you up after. So we got married at 1 year and a month, and we stayed sober from 87 to 98, and then he had to go back out. And I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they had never seen me pick up, and they had never seen him pick up. But he failed to enlarge his spiritual life, I guess. I don't know. I can't take his inventory, but he had to pick up and use again. And so after a while of that, I couldn't do it anymore. And when I saw my son jump on his back and say, Dad, stop hitting Mommy, Mommy, I'm like, it's over. So he had to go. And he's still in and out. And anyway, so we have these 2 beautiful kids, and I call them my promises. And they grew up in these rooms. I didn't go to church. I was, kind of raised in a cult up in Utah, and but not real active in that. And so I didn't church my kids at all. We just learned to pray for God's will and the power to carry that out and how to serve others. I learned in here that when I was bullied as a kid, all through, growing up, I don't know what page it's on. Oh, I have ADHD as well, super bad. I don't have any pages memorized except the old 447, which is now 417 for acceptance, and 83, right? So we talked about the promises, and I learned how to pray the AA prayers with my kids. And I learned that the people that hurt us, something's wrong with them, that they're sad. I just told my kids there's something sad about them. And it's not about you if they're being mean to you. And we get to pray that really awesome things will happen for them. Who does that, right? And I'm teaching this to my little preschoolers. And the preschool teacher comes to me one day when she was with my son, and she said, I've never seen better conflict resolution in a toddler in my life. And it's all from these prayers in this book. When I was 10 years sober, I never really had the Christian thing. When I was very little, I knew there was something stirring in me, very young, a higher power. And my daughter said, Mom, I want to learn about Jesus and go to church. And I'm like, what? Why? Why would you need this? So I went to this church, and one of the pastors gave me a book about Jesus. And there's 4 years of his life from when he was 30 to 34 when they killed him. And I read those stories to my kids, and those stories were amazing and miraculous. And it was just like her big book. Be free from self, serve others. It was just the same AA message. So I did teach those stories to my kids. And my kids are my promises. My daughter is this fabulous dancer, and from very young. And she ends up being an NFL cheerleader for the Houston Texans from Utah. This Utah kid. And she goes, I'm like, what are you going to go over there for? You're going to be murdered in Houston. And she's like, no, I want to do this. I can do this. Well, I can do it. And she had been a famous cheerleader in high school or in college, and she had a movie about her and stuff. But so anyway, she goes, and she makes this team. And her first game, they say, circle up, who wants to pray? And here's my unchurched kid. We did not go to church. We just learned those stories of Jesus, but she learned the AA prayers. And she's like, I'll pray. There's all these super churched, awesome, wonderful kids that know it. And she's like, I'll pray. And she just says, God, we pray for your will and the power to carry that out for this game today. And just use us for you. And she prays the AA prayers, and they're weeping. And they got out of the prayer, and the coach said, Olivia, will you please be our chaplain? So she was the chaplain for the NFL cheerleaders for her years on the team. And that's from AA. She just was an AA kid. My son, in 2015, he's an extreme athlete. He skis 100 days a year. He rides his bike 365 days a year in Utah. Grew up at birth on the backpack in the skis. And he was riding his bike home from work one day, and he had just taken off his helmet. It was 100 degrees. He turned in front of a car. It hit him. He died at the scene. This was 2015 summer. I was in Texas, and I got the call, and the guy who was the ER doc was a friend that I went to high school with, and he said, Andy, Parker's in here and he's not going to make it. Get here as fast as you can. Well, the people on the scene, the guy that hit him, it was my son's fault. He was a daredevil dumbass and pulled in front of this guy, and he hits him, and he was doing a residency at the University of Utah, which is where my families were physicians. My kids were born, and we lived right by there. And he was like 2.5 miles from there when this happened. The guy behind him was in neurosurgery. The guy behind him was an ICU neuro nurse. They saved his life at the scene. When the ambulance got there, they said, here's what you got. They called up to the U, and then they called me when he got in. And I had to have a layover in Dallas. And so in Dallas, the doc says, we don't know if he's going to make it, but if he does, we're definitely taking his leg. And there was no oxygen to it. And so I've, again, got this peace that passes understanding because of this program. And I just pray for God's will, and I pray for acceptance. I really don't pray for healing. I just pray for acceptance of God's will. I don't know how to ask for things, unless it's going to help somebody else, right? But I just kind of trust him. So anyway, my son, I get there and he's alive, and he makes it, and he keeps making it day after day. And we almost lose him a bunch of times. And then they almost took his leg one day. On day 11, I would be in the room, the room, and he had his own nurse on neurocritical, and I would just pray these prayers, and the nurses would come in and they would just weep. And anyway, my son made it, and on day 11 he did a thumbs up. And if he was going to make it, he was going to be a vegetable in a nursing home. He skied 100 days. He's almost skied 50 days this year, and it's only January. He rides his bike almost every day. He has a traumatic brain injury. It's not the same. But we're so glad that he's here. And he's so happy for life. He's so positive about life. He loves pot. He has a medical card. I'm like, fuck. Just be an alcoholic so you can get to the rooms. But anyway, so Mom, I have no higher power. I do not believe in God, and I love pot. And so anyway, every morning when I get on my knees, I physically go, God, here's Parker, and here's Olivia, and here's me. I'm yours. We are yours. You have way better plans for my children than I do. Use me. Empty me of me. I do that all day. Empty me of me. I'm a vessel. Just use me. Because if I'm involved, then things get messy. And so God has got both of my kids, for sure. Even in the hardest times in sobriety, I just have a joy. I still wake up and giggle every single morning that I'm sober. I start going to conferences and conventions. I went to the AA World Convention at Minneapolis in 2000. There were 50,000 of us in the dome. What's the dome called where the Vikings play, or Minnesota Vikings play? Metro Dome? 50,000 of us. I go alone. The streets are just teeming with AA people. Every building has a meeting going on. It's all these great old AA people. There were still a few alive. Saturday night sobriety countdown. I don't know if y'all have been to one, but any conference you go to or even workshop, if it's a weekend on Saturday night, you get to go to a sobriety countdown. And it's so awesome. And this is where I met KB. He saw me stand. It's like 36 years of sobriety. What? I was still standing up. So what happened in that stadium, they said, who's got the most sobriety in the room? And they kind of knew in the stadium. And it was Cersei Whaley. He's since passed. He's from Dallas, Texas. He was a friend of Ebby's. And he had his own club up in Dallas and had meetings 3 times a day. Amazing old guy. So he gets up, and the podium's down here, and I'm over here, and he's way up here, and he gets up out of his wheelchair, and he's like, I got 53 years, and the stadium goes crazy, and it's deafening. It's like, oh my God, 53 years, I don't know how sober I was. I was, 15 years or something. And so then they count down. Who has 52 years, 51 years, 50 years, and they count down by years. And then those people stand up, then they sit down, and then they get down to 2 years. Who has 2 years of sobriety in the stadium? And then they stand up. Then they go to 18 months. And then they go to 1 year. And at a year, they start counting back by months. So who has 11 months and 10 months, and they're standing up and sitting down. And everybody is hysterical, right? And I have chills talking about it. And so they count down to 30 days, and at 30 days, they start counting by days. And so it gets down to 5 days. Who's got 5 days of sober? Imagine that being like your 5th meeting and you're in the Astrodome or whatever. And so they say, who's got 1 day, who's got 24 hours of sobriety? And it's so loud in there, you can't hear a thing, and it gets real quiet. And this kid who's up near the front stands up, and somebody's like, let's take him to his first meeting at the Dome. And he's got 1 day, and he's near the front, and he stands up, and people clap and cry for about 10 minutes for this new guy who's just standing there just like, what the hell is Alcoholics Anonymous? And then they call for Cersei, the old guy. They say, Cersei, will you please come up here? So Cersei gets up in his wheelchair, and his handler takes him down the stage, and they bring him to the side of the stage, and he gets up, and he walks up on the stage, and then they ask the new guy to come up on the stage. So there's the guy with 1 day and the guy with 53 years, and they hand a big book to Cersei, and they have Cersei sign it to the new guy. And then he gives it to the new guy, and he gives him a hug, and Cersei's this big old guy, and he gives the best hugs. And so this is who we are. It's just about giving it back. And once you go to something like that, you're never going to drink again. I'm sorry. You're recovered. When you see that stuff. So conferences and conventions and workshops, and they're all over Texas, which is really awesome. I'm booked every weekend till March. And I was in London a couple of years ago with the cheerleaders, with the Texans, and I got to go to meetings there, and I saw it was like Rock and Roll Hall of freaking Fame. I mean, I would love to name names, but I'm not going to, right? I go in this room, and they're like, I walk into this old, beautiful cathedral, and there's 100 people. And there's this beautiful little chapel on the right, and this beautiful chapel on the left, and this lovely, it was by the palace. I figured I wouldn't be murdered there. And so this woman says, how sober are you? And I said, I'm 30-something years. She said, well, you're going to be in this room tonight then. And then they have a room just for newcomers. And I'm like, well. So I walk in, and it's like the Rolling Stones and Cream and me. And I'm just like, I look a couple seats down, and it's like my all-time rock and roll Hall of Fame guitar god. He's sitting next to me, 2 seats down. I just start shaking, and I'm sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I knew he was sober. He got sober a little after I did. But to be in the room with him, and they said, and tonight, I won't break his anonymity, and they have an opener. So for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the meeting, they said tonight Eric has agreed to share his story, and then we go and we share, and it's him, and he's sharing his story, and he's talking about working in the prisons, and that's where he loves to be, and his guys in the prison are starting a band, and they didn't even ask him to be part of it, and he was like begging, can I please be in the band? And they're like, maybe. So anyway, wherever we go in the world, we have the same story. No matter who we are, we have the same story. I've been at meetings in Mexico and all over Europe and all over the U.S. And God bless Texas, y'all. Texas has some really good AA. It's amazing. It's kind of like Ohio of the South. It's like ground zero. It's like ground one for AA. So much history here. And so I've loved studying that. What else? Oh, the steps. One little thing. The 4th step can take you 1 day. You can wake up in the morning, put on your sweats, get a notepad, and you can finish it by nighttime, unless you're a total asshole. And you have like a million people that you hate.
I'm a total asshole, man.
It's super simple. In the first 100, you know what? They would do it with each other. You don't have to go do it alone. Go ask your sponsor. If somebody asks me, let's go sit down. Well, let's write out the columns. Let's do it. Let's just write down the names today or this hour, and let's do it together. If somebody can't quite get going, ask somebody to help you. Sit down with a fellow and do it. Step 1 and 2 aren't really action steps, but if you know that you're one of us. And the higher power thing, I was sitting on my back step in a blizzard snowstorm in Salt Lake I don't know how sober I was, and my husband was going out, and I just said, if you are there, because when I came in that first big meeting, I know now that was my higher power. That was a power that was greater than me. When I walked into that Alano Club, that was so powerful, and it was way more than me. And I didn't really count on that. I was still thinking, okay, it's a God, there's some higher power. But AA was an obvious higher power for me, and that's what kept me here, right? I had this undeniable higher power of this program that started in 35. And so, but at 10 years sober, I had that white light experience on my back porch, and everything was rough, and I just said, please, where are you? Let me feel you. And I felt it right next to me, right here, right? And it was undeniable. And so I have dry times with my spirituality, but I go through the motions. And if I can just make the expression of a willingness to believe, the expression of a prayer, make the physical expression of the willingness, because we just need to be willing. And it always works out no matter what. And I don't give up when things seem dry. I know he's there. I'm just not listening. And what else? I brainstorm and jot things down before I step up here. So anyway, AA has been a really great gift, and we're all here, so we're really lucky, and the odds can be against us. But I know that this group just happens to be in the pages. And so you don't hear about people's dead cats in the room. That's so awesome. Where I got sober, I heard a lot of that in Park City, our little group. I was in a meeting in Park City. That little old town probably has 4 meetings or 5 meetings a day now. And I walk into a room, I never hear higher power, I never hear steps, I never hear service in an hour, and I'm sitting there just crying. I heard a lot about people's shrinks and stuff, but so Texas is really a great place to get sober and a great place for weekends. And y'all can have my number. If you need some humor in sobriety, I have got the best, funniest speaker tapes you will ever hear. There's no board.
Joe and Charlie are pretty funny too.
Yeah, get my number. I've got stuff for you. And what else? Just AA. There's so much joy here. So much joy. If you're not finding joy, then something's going on. So you need to talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm not having fun, and this isn't awesome, and I'm not having awesome days. Above, your shit's hitting the fan, but you've got to be able to feel that something's going on in your life that's really great. Or you're just doing something wrong. So just talk to somebody who's done it for a long time and find out what you need to tweak. The specific instructions for getting sober are written out in the first 164. Every direction is in there. And it works 100% of the time if we do it. The rest of the steps are a gift. There's a 10th step app I do every night with my sponsor. It's got a picture of Bill, if you've probably seen it in the app store. Just look up 10th step app. It's got the questions right out of the book. I fill that every night and I send it to my sponsor, and continuous step work. And if somebody asks me to speak, I say yes. And that is all I've got. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for asking me.